Hello guys, welcome to another session. In this session, we are going to learn about functional components. So let's look into that. If you remember that in the earlier session, we have discussed about two type of component. One is the functional component, another one is the class comp. So basically, I have already been discussed about the functional component. It is nothing but a JavaScript function where we will return the JSX code. Right now, don't bother about JSX. We will discuss about more in another session. For a time being, just you consider that functional component contains a function and that function returns the UI element like this. So if you define the functional component in React term, then I can tell that functional component is a component which receives the props and returns the UI element. So to make the concept more concrete, what we will do, let's write a code so that we will understand that what actually the functional component and how we can write the functional component in React. So what we are going to do in this exercise, we are going to create a header component which will display a static text. So let's jump into the Visual Studio Code. So this is the application which we have created with the help of Create React App. So now what I am going to do, I am going to remove the generated code from here. Let me delete it. So this is the first step, save it. Now the second step, what I am going to do, I am going to create a folder structure over here and I am going to create a folder called component, and this component folder contains all the components. So the first component which we are going to design is the header component. So now within the component folder, we are going to create another folder that is called header, and this header folder contains the component file which is going to be header.js, and this header.js contains the functional component. So to create the functional component, we first need to import React from the React library, and now the second step, what we need to do, we need to create a function which will return the JSX or say HTML. So you can write it with the traditional way. I will write function. Let's give a name header, and over here we need to specify, and within that we need to specify return. So return over here the h1 tag I'm going to return, and I need to specify header. This is just a placeholder I'm going to specify, and then afterward we need to export it so that we can incorporate it into the app.js, that is our root component. So we need to specify export. If we will not specify the export, then it will not be incorporated and we will not get the context of this component. So we need to tell that default, and then we need to specify the name. I'm going to tell that header. Save it. So now we have written the functional component. Now let's proceed to the next step. Now the next step is we need to incorporate the header component in the root component. So how we will do that? First we need to add it over here. So now let's import the header component. So we need to specify import, and here we need to specify the component name header, and here we need to tell that from, and then dot, and then component. I want to use header, and here I need to tell that this header component. So now we have incorporated, and if I want to use it, I need to tell that header, close it. So this is now incorporated into the root component, that is app. So let's look into the output. So now you will find that it has put the header component into the app component, and that is being displayed on this page. So now let's proceed further. So here we have seen that the traditional way of writing the functions. On the same note, we will also use the ES6 syntax with the arrow function. So how we will use it? We need to specify const, and we need to tell that header, the name of the variable, that is called const, and then we need to specify the parenthesis, and over here we will tell that arrow function. Save it. Now let's look into the output. Let's do some changes over here so that we will see the effect. Header with arrow. Save it. Then you will find that it displayed the header with arrow. Now let's proceed further. Now let's discuss about some point to remember for this session. And the point to remember with regards to export. So there are two types of export. The first one is the default export, which we are using it, and the second type is the named export. If you write export and remove this one, save it. So what is the difference between named export and the default export? So the difference is, so when we exporting with default export, then we can import with any other name, for example XYZ, and we can use it over XYZ and it will work perfectly fine. So let's look into the output and see here there is no error. But now you are exporting with the named export, then it must be imported with the same name. So let's look into that. Save it. Now let's jump into the browser, and here you will find that it throws an error as it is not recognizing this XYZ. So to make it working, we need to change over here. We need to specify within the curly braces, we need to specify header, and over here we need to tell that header, and now save it. Let's jump into the browser to see the output, and then you will find that it back to normal. So now I hope you understand the difference between the named export and the default export. So let's proceed further. So now you understand that what actually the functional component is and how we can design the functional component in React. It is pretty much a straightforward process to write the functional component in React. You just have to remember the steps. Step 1, you should create a component folder. Within the component folder, we are going to create the folder with the name of the component which we are going to create, and that component folder contains all the files related to that particular component. Currently we are having a single file, header.js. Along with that, we can have header.css, which we will apply the styling into this component. That we will look into further session of this course. Once we have created the file header.js, then we have created a function over here that is returning the JSX, or say HTML in a more simpler term. And once it is being done, then we have exported it. After exporting the function, the context of this component is available within the application, and then we can incorporate over here. So app.js, as we already discussed about, this is the root component and all the component will be laid into this component. So over here I wanted to show you the diagram again. So in this diagram I had showed you that we are having 5 component and which is being placed within the app component. So currently we have designed a very simple static component which contains header, which is a static text, and in the app.js we have imported this component and then we have incorporated it over here. So this is what I wanted to demonstrate you in this session. See you in the next session where we will discuss about the class component. So on this note I am stopping over here. See you in the next session. Till then, bye bye, take care.